Hi there. You're listening to The Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. I hope you are doing well today. Autumn is in full swing here, and I love all the colors. Today I will be reading Chapter 1, A Forest Soul, which is the beginning of Part 1, Audentes Fortuna Iuvat. I can't read Latin, so that's probably a butchering, but it means simply, fortune favors the bold. Now, let's get started. For as long as I could remember, I had been playing the Kingdom game. Everglade was like a second home to me. I remember each of its curves, shapes, and contours. I remember the great willows by the water, the brazen oaks, the beautiful red maples will never leave my memory. We lived nearby in a grand, newly built 4-bedroom house on Eden. I was the in-between daughter, not quite the oldest, but not quite the youngest either. Back then, I had rough blonde hair that was wild and untamed, accompanied by my poor, dull brown eyes. I loathed them immensely. They reminded me of balls of mud. My nose was dastardly pig-like, and I hated it with every fiber of my being. Luckily for me, I grew into my features and my horrendous nose would eventually subside. Even my muddy eyes became a harmonized chestnut over time. My siblings shared the same atrocious nose, with my brother Patrick being the oldest and loudest, and my sister Mira the smallest and most quiet. That left me and my brother Travis somewhere in the middle, floating. Patrick had once played the Kingdom game, but he had grown tired of it. He had been a great soldier once, a guard for the Duke of the Lost Forest. His legacy was non-existent compared to mine. Like so many before him, he had lost his imaginative streak and left the meadow after only a short jaunt there. There was an ancient legend that foretold of a black void opening, and you would walk, more or less be sucked into it, ending your time in the meadow forever. Your imagination was wiped, and you became a teenager. My sister Mira was too young to play, but Travis often accompanied me. Travis looked a lot like me, but his eyes were blue instead of brown. We unfortunately shared the same dull hair color and the same pudgy figure. We both worked as stewards in the Lost Forest. It was June, and our holidays off school were just around the corner. All of us were held on edge, victims of the classroom's eternal torture. We desired so strongly to go outside and play our game. There was much I wanted to accomplish that summer. I had heard whispers that change was on the wind. After school, I walked with Gabrielle Sinclair to the meadow. Yes, that Gabrielle Sinclair, the one and only. She was my best friend at the time, and we shared a homeroom class together. We were there, together in the meadow, since inception, it seemed. I must have been around 8 or 9, probably closer to 8. We had been primordial nymphs that rose from the water. Gabrielle had a higher calling, however, and served as the heir to the Lost Forest. I, alongside my brother, were merely stewards in service to His Grace the Duke. The girl was a very important figure despite her small stature. Gabrielle was a petite girl, often called an elf or pixie by those in the meadow because of her appearance and demeanor. She had lustrous, long, flowing hazelnut-brown hair that fell in ripples to just below her shoulders. Her chocolate-brown eyes were always animated and large. She looked every bit a gleeful pixie. I often envied her cheery and light disposition, despite the current establishment wreaking havoc in the meadow. His Grace speaks of change, Gabrielle said to me as we walked. The birches along the trail were high and mighty, their green leaves swaying in the light summer breeze. It was a gorgeous summer day, and I wanted change. Change needed to come sooner rather than later. The change that everyone seemed to speak about was mostly referring to the king. The throne was currently occupied by King Titan, a member of the illustrious Rosewood dynasty. For many, there had never been a time when a Rosewood did not occupy the throne. There is much talk that Titan is ready to leave, she continued. I stopped for a moment, taking a second to really admire the words that Gabrielle had spoken. The void is opening. Leave? I turned around to her and smiled. That would be a dream come true. Titan was a nightmare, to say the least. He had been ruling for the past 3 seasons, and things had not been great. His own predecessor, a Rosewood cousin named Nathaniel, was also terrible. King's Summit had been a menagerie of confused aristocrats and overpowered militant jesters for generations. Perhaps the wrongdoings against the Lost Forest will finally stop, Gabrielle said, starting to walk again. The two of us jogged to the Bermuda Bridge, ready to enter the meadow. How wonderful it would be if the king kept away from us. How can you help for that? I asked. There has never been a Rosewood king that would ignore us willingly. The bridge was already teeming with children eager to start playing. The heir to the throne of Everglade was Titan's younger brother, Thomas. I hardly knew him, but he seemed like another rosewood thorn. Gabrielle told me he was timid, shy, and overprotected. Thomas had a brother, Justin, who also played the game. Justin was much nicer and was more out and about. He considered himself the spare, since Thomas was the heir. This, therefore, allowed him a more leisurely lifestyle. I doubt Thomas will change things, I remarked as we headed into the forest. I felt at home here. The trees shaded us as we walked, and I felt soothing calmness overcome me like a wave of a pool. Anyone is better than Titan, Gabrielle said. I gave her a nod, and we were lost in the trees, running and laughing. The Duke held power in the old playground within the Lost Forest. Before the new playground had been constructed at the royal city some time ago, the Lost Forest was the hub of attention. It had been the capital of Everglade and the most popular spot to be. Some kids called the place Gaia. When the new playground came, the Lost Forest playground fell into decline. The weeds became overgrown, and the bushes were not tended anymore. The playground became neglected and old. Nonetheless, the children still clung to it as the regional capital and played on the equipment like it was new. There was a circular compound leading up to a tall slide nearest the tallest oaks. The rotunda had a built-in tic-tac-toe game on one wall. It could be played from inside or outside the compound. That was the Duke's seat of power, and where we would find him most days. His name was Castor Bratton, and he was considered to be one of the last elves left in the meadow. According to Gabrielle, elves had once been popular in the Lost Forest. King Nathaniel, Titan's predecessor, had apparently exterminated them and forced the Lost Forest into submission. They had apparently been too powerful. The magic they had wielded was allegedly a threat to the throne. He had broken our spirit and ravaged our lands. It was rumored that Castor and Gabrielle were both elves. I did not know what it took to become an elf, or what they even involved entirely, other than the fact that Gabrielle and a few others claimed they had existed. I did not see any evidence of their existence. There was some sort of mysticism surrounding them. They were powerful, to say the least. There were rumors spoken that they could cast spells, feel others' emotions, and had a deeper connection to the forest. "We should speak with Duke Castor," Gabrielle remarked. "I am certain we will find answers." I nodded, and we headed for the rotunda. My brother Travis was already there, studiously awaiting in the circular dome area. He had a burlap cape strung from his shoulders and a green kerchief around his neck. This was the sacred uniform of a forest dweller. "Is Duke Castor around?" I asked. Travis shook his head. "No, he is not. The Duchess is here, however." Our other mutual friend, Alexandra Carleton, came up from behind us. I caught sight of her and waved. She had long black glossy hair and a sharp beak nose. Her eyes, however, were a redeeming light blue in contrast to her aggressive face. Alex, as we preferred to call her, came from England and spoke with a light accent. She was merely a citizen in the land and had no royal function. She had a penchant for wearing red, and today she wore a cherry-red summery dress. She might have been 10 at this time. "How are you all?" she asked. I knew Alex to be a bit mischievous. "Well, I suppose," I answered aimlessly, my mind preoccupied with revolution on the throne. "There is word on the wind that change is coming." Alex nodded. She seemed to know or have heard the rumors. Secrets are like kindling. They often trigger wildfire gossip. "We wanted to speak with the Duke, but he is not here yet." Gabrielle said. "Instead, I suggest we seek counsel with her grace." The three of us girls, accompanied by Travis, went to the back of the rotunda where a ladder stood. The Duchess was at the top of the lookout slide, staring into the deep woods. During this time of year, the trees were almost at their fullest. The forest was dense and relaxing. The Duchess reminded me of a slender Scottish princess. She had noble ginger hair and light pale skin. She let her curls float down her back, unkempt and untamed. She had placed a plastic tiara in her curly mess of hair, guarded by a large costume ruby in the center. She wore a matching necklace, adorned with the same ruby. She turned to us as we climbed the stairs, revealing her thoughtful emerald eyes. Her outfit was simple, light blue denim matched with a green velvet peasant blouse. She was 13, perhaps a tad younger. "Your Grace," we said in unison, bowing before her. The lookout was a bit cramped, and my body was crammed against Gabrielle. The Duchess wore a look of concern. "Such a large group of citizens," she said, her voice light and a little anxious. "What brings you?" "Duchess Matilda," Gabrielle began, wriggling forward. "There has been word that changes are coming to the meadow." Matilda dipped her head slightly, but before she could reply, the Duke arrived below us. The Duchess kept silent, watching as Castor trekked across the open playground to reach us near the big slide. A cape of black silk floated from his shoulders into the wind he created by his stride. Castor, like his consort, was thin and tall. He had bristles of facial hair scattered on his chin, a handsome and dignified face. His eyes were an entanglement of blue and green, matched with a melange of brown hair. It lay flat and swished to the right side. He had just celebrated his 14th birthday a week prior. "What is this gossip?" Castor asked sharply. He was staring up at us with wide, intrusive eyes from the bottom of the long tunnel slide. The Duke had a bike helmet tucked under the crook of one arm, and the other hand resting gently on his hip. He seemed alert and alarmed. His voice was going through puberty, and at this time he sounded almost like a frog. "Change on the wind is all tall tales," Castor said to us then, his mood softening. "Nothing is ever concrete unless it is spoken by the king." "The end of the school year is approaching," Matilda said from her perch. "Any news regarding royal changes will be revealed then." That was the end of our conversation. When the Duke went into his compound, his entourage seemed to seep from the forest. Nothing more would be said on the matter. Children were now actively playing, leaving us three in the dust. I looked over at Gabrielle. "Something is fishy here." She nodded in reply. "I agree entirely." Our affairs did not allow us to leave the Lost Forest often, so because of that, many of us were unaware of what transpired outside of our forest home. We were frequently forced to rely on outside sources and messengers for any gossip. As a steward, I kept in close contact with my counterparts in the royal city and beyond. None of them spoke of anything but the impending changes. The royal capital was in an uproar over these supposed changes, but nothing was concrete yet. No one had any reliable information. Some were saying Titan would continue to rule for many more seasons to come, while others had different gossip to share. There was even some wildfire rumor going around that Justin would inherit in place of Thomas. After school one afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to King's Summit. I did not like to come to this place since it represented oppression and excessive royal splendor. The only way to find the right answers I sought for was to speak with the king's right-hand man, the Chancellor. Even then, answers were not guaranteed. Kyle Brady, better known in our kingdom as Kratos, was King Titan's overseer. He was the monarch's major domo, his vizier. He had a severe ego problem, having served the terrible King Titan with formidable nastiness and intrigue. I took Alex with me for support, considering Kyle could be so overbearing at times. "I'm surprised you were able to secure a meeting with this arrogant fool," Alex said as we walked up the hill. The hill to King's Summit was as steep as ever, rooted with rocks and gravel. It was always a harsh trek. "He always has an opening for a duke's steward," I winked. Back in those days, the Duke of the Lost Forest did not have a royal attendant. he employed multiple stewards instead. There might have been 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 stewards serving at any given time. Despite how many could be on watch, the stewards were important kids and were regarded as personal attendants upon the Duke and his consort. There were also stewards assigned to look after the heir, but Gabrielle did not regularly elect to have one. The success was primarily done to show off how important the Duke and his in-game family were. When we reached the top of the hill, the area was flanked by guards. Boys with plastic spears and Roman plastic cuirass stood like statues, watching us with their distant gazes. They did not speak to us as we walked past, seeking the chambers of the Chancellor. From this vantage, I could also see the 2 thrones. Titan had lost his queen last year. Poor Diana's family had moved away. In his grief, the king kept the throne there symbolically. It stood painfully empty at ceremonies and during routine council meetings. The chair was a constant reminder of her absence, and I could not figure out how that helped the king and his grief. Diana had been an all-right queen. She was always kept away from most civilian life and often seemed to just appear next to Titan. To me, she was merely a symbol of the broken institution. She had no real function or role, just that of a royal spendthrift. Sometimes, at royal events, I would see her chatting with the lords and ladies. She would talk at great lengths with Prince Justin, too. I had been surprised when she left, but given her time in the meadow, I am more than certain that Diana was happy to have left. She had been a fragile girl, radiant blonde hair matched with an unfortunately sad face. Her eyes were watery blue, and no one could tell if she was happy or crying. It all looked the same. She had been dominated by Titan, the unforgiving force of power in the realm. While all smiles touring the meadow, behind closed doors it was said that she could not even choose her own ladies-in-waiting. Her entire outward personality was whispered to have been controlled by His Majesty and Lord Kratos. I stopped to gaze at the wicker throne. It looked weary from excessive use. A vision of myself on the throne came to me suddenly, quite unprovoked. I was in the finest regalia, a cape of red velvet floating down my back and touching my feet. A crown of gold sat on my head, my hair fine and wavy. I was regal, holding a scepter in the air triumphantly. Servants were handing me wine glasses filled with pink lemonade. One was holding a bowl of fruit. I blinked and the vision disappeared as quickly as it had come. I carried on with Alex. The Chancellor kept a small folded table under the great oak bearing the old tree fort. He was shaded as he worked, but he could pack up at a moment's notice. His own attendant, a girl named Heather Petrenko, stood idle. Kyle was a short and chubby kid with a round face and gleeful blue eyes. When he squinted, you could tell he was not very pleased. When we approached, he was scribbling on paper with an ink pen. The pen had a long crimson-red feather protruding from it. He did not care to glance up at us. "My lord," I bowed. The Chancellor was also an aristocrat by decree of King Titan, and was owed the respect of his unfortunate class. "What brings you, forest dwellers?" Kyle looked up at us crudely. Heather stared attentively, unmoving. "We knew you could clarify if changes are coming to the meadow or not," Alex took the lead. "There is much chatter around all of us," I added. The Lord Chancellor looked at us warily, unsure if he should reply or not. "Such information is classified, girls," he said at last, placing his pen aside. "You will have to wait until the last day of school celebrations before anything of that magnitude is revealed." I had figured as much. Kratos was so maliciously delighted when delivering the news to us. He wanted us to be on the edge for the next coming variations. Yet he had exposed to us that something was going to happen. "Heather," Kratos said, summoning his attendant, "see these girls out." Heather obliged and walked us to the edge of the throne room. It still sat empty, with the thrones bare in the summer breeze. Her blue eyes were vacant, and she did not speak. The end of the school year was fast approaching, and soon a giant gala would be held to welcome summer and all its splendor. We would have to wait until then to learn of anything new. When we returned to the Lost Forest heavy with defeat, I split off from Alex and went walking. I had to be alone. I strolled along the water's edge and thought deeply about the changes that would come. I assumed Titan would be resigning. He was almost 15, practically an adult. He would be leaving the meadow to one of his brothers. All the Rosewood boys were evil in my mind, no matter who occupied the throne. I found Gabrielle walking near the reeds, humming intently to herself. "Hello, Caitlin," she said with a smile. "How was your trip to the royal city?" "Impossible." Kratos wouldn't speak, I told her, sighing. I felt defeated. Not even a duke's steward could obtain such information. I suppose Kratos had a reason to conceal it. Sensitive information had to be preserved. "The duke was speaking earlier about the last day of school," Gabrielle told me. "It is to be this coming Friday. Aren't you excited?" I could not hide my sorrow nor my anger. The last day of school was supposed to be a joyous day for us all, a welcome to the summer holiday. Now it was tainted with rosewood indecency and a sudden change in our kingdom. "Hardly," I spat. Gabrielle recoiled. "This day will spell doom for us. Another rosewood fool will sit the throne. If not Titan, why not Thomas? They are all clowns." "Thomas isn't like that." Gabrielle was swift to come to his defense. She had come up beside me now when we were playing amongst the bushes. "He's kind-hearted, gentle, he's very shy. I have art class with him." "I do not believe you one bit," I answered, stepping away. "This change will bring bad things, for that I am certain. I have such an overwhelming distaste for these rosewood idiots." Gabrielle seemed too stunned to speak. She froze halfway through a boxwood bush. "They are using our most sacred day to announce the abdication of Titan, I'm sure," I continued. Gabrielle appeared out of the bush, a placid look on her face. "This day will herald a new dawn for the meadow, Caitlin. You must be positive." "How can I?" asked flatly, thrusting my arms out in a "I don't understand" gesture. "Are you not listening to me? Of course I am." "No, you really aren't," I countered quickly. "You do not want to listen because you are afraid that I am right." "Hardly." Gabrielle's answer was lightning fast. "You will see, eventually," I remarked, turning away from her. I could not believe what I was hearing. "You must not worry, Caitlin," she tried to call after me. I was already walking away. How could she not see that these rosewood boys spelt nothing but the word trouble? In my time as one of the Duke's stewards, I had learned a few things about the capital and how the king's inner court worked. Kratos was just a cog in the massive machine that made King's Titan reign chug along like a locomotive. There were others that caused calamity, including the king's own brother, Justin. While Justin might have been fair in appearance and fun-loving, he was certainly spiteful. He had once been in charge of forcing Sunset into submission and reorganizing some of their structure. There was hardly any room for error, no less control. King Titan had given his brothers and his jesters full reign over the meadow. They were free to rule how they pleased. The king always encouraged unruliness and evil. There was a reason the other nobles stayed away from King's Summit. Even if Thomas came to the throne, Justin would rule the military and Thomas would become a figurehead. The corrupt system would continue to grind and move, uninterrupted by Titan's departure. When Thursday arrived, there was much talk in the meadow. The falsehood of change dangled over the citizens like candy hidden in a piñata, and we were all eager to have a bite. I went immediately to the Lost Forest after school, arriving just in time to attend the council meeting held by the Duke and Duchess. We were all gathered in front of the rotunda, the Duke and Duchess standing side by side like true sovereigns. They were dressed in their school clothes, but both had vibrant green sashes made of what looked like silk strewn across their chests. The couple had their forest twig crowns on their head as well. That could be hardly missed. Dozens of children hung about, forming a circle around them. There was such a loud bustling of individuals it felt like an active beehive. "What is this all about?" I asked my brother when I caught sight of him. He had beaten me here. I stepped across to him, dodging many students who were seated. "Their graces are addressing the rumors and all possible game plans pending what happens tomorrow," Travis explained in his normally neutral tone. I stood near Alex and Gabrielle. "The uproar over the rumors has reached a fever pitch. The Duke cannot ignore it any longer. The meadow is very scared." "Yes, I knew that much," I said to him, looking forward now. The Duke looked worried. The The wildfire rumors and gossip had become like constrictive vines, suffocating everyone. Children were in a panic and they needed answers. We did not know who to believe. A few children were clinging to old playground equipment. A couple were hanging from trees. I was standing in a cluster with some friends and allies. Castor held up his hands for silence. I wish to address all the curious reports that you have been hearing, my loyal citizens. He paused and surveyed the crowd. There are a great many changes occurring in the meadow, and I feel a strong magnetic shift is going to happen. The reign of one king appears to be coming to an end, while the reign of another is on the horizon. This is all I know. Do you know for sure if Titan is leaving? Someone from the trees hollered. Nay, Castor was fast to answer. Royal secrets like that are guarded, even from the most noble and high-ranking individuals such as myself. I could tell he was lying. He knew. Titan wishes to reveal this plan to only his innermost court. I can, however, give assurance that something is coming. Shouldn't we be rejoicing? Alex asked loudly. Titan is leaving and Thomas is next. I hear he's a shy, timid loser. Should we really be this afraid? We are merely afraid of the unknown. It was Matilda who answered. Titan is a powerful king, and while he might bequeath the throne to his brother Thomas, there is no telling what will happen. There are whispers that a force is amassing behind Justin, the people's prince. A great deal of the powerful elite desire him as their king, so that they may continue their lifestyle. Many are unsure of how Thomas will lead, since he is so sheltered at King's Summit, Castor added. I gritted my teeth. Justin as the king would ruin this kingdom even more than when Titan was around. The euphoric citizens of the royal city affectionately referred to Justin as the people's prince, mostly because he was so friendly and entertaining. His favorite hobby was schmoozing. We had only seen him as malicious and evil. Our plan is to remain steady and to not interfere, Castor continued nobly. The royal city has been nothing but a debacle. We will continue to remain out of their affairs until the dust settles. We will endure and be on our guard. The knights are ready to fight if needed. There was only slight agreement in the air, but nothing felt right. I looked around the clearing as the children started to disperse. I had more questions than answers at this point. Would there be a possible power struggle? Would Justin try and seize the throne? If Thomas is as much as a loser as we think he is, he will have no chance at becoming king, Alex said as we began to walk. I nodded. Justin will toss him aside the minute Titan leaves the meadow. I agree. I stopped and smirked at her. Jokingly, I stated, You should marry the fool. That concludes Chapter 1, A Forest Soul. Next week, I will be reading Chapter 2, The King is Dead, Long Live the King. Take care and see you next time. Music for the podcast is Space Journey by Hartzman. You can find all the Chronicles of Everglade novels exclusively on Amazon, and check out my latest novel, The Train to Dranmore, which is also on Amazon. Find us on Instagram and Facebook as well, at The Everglade Chronicles. Thanks for reading and thank you for your support. See you next time.